yourself to give an offering to be pleasing to the Lord.
Oh, wait. That's what we talked about last week, right?
I like it. Draw us near to your heart, oh God, let us rest our heads on your chest, place our hands in yours. Oh Lord, hold us face to face, embrace this place. Okay, everybody's weekend went well? Great, that's a resounding yes. All right, we're in a series here at the Vine. We've been studying through the book of Chronicles. It's found in your Old Testament. It is the last book of the Hebrew Old Testament. You find it in the middle of your Old Testament, and it covers much of the rich history that goes along with how God moved his people from point A to point B. We've been working through the section in Chronicles of the transition between Saul as king to David as king. We've looked at the surrounding circumstances to that, how he moves the kind of centralized power and political power to Jerusalem and begins to rule from there. His first act is dealing with the Ark of the Covenant. We've gone through all of that. We're going to backtrack to chapter 12, pick up one little tiny verse that I just can't pass up. Throw you this because there's some really good thought that goes behind some of the things that happen here. In chapter 12, there's a list of all the tribes and the tribal leaders who are propelling David to the throne. In there, it lists the actual men, the actual leaders, and then the amount of people they're bringing as military backing and just community backing for David and his throne. Are you with me? And we find this one little verse that just has this phrase in it that I can't pass up. So here we go. First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32 says this: from Issachar, and that's the tribe of Issachar, the sons of Issachar, the people of Issachar, were the 200 leaders and all their relatives at their command. You'll notice if you're actually looking at the passage that it lists 200 leaders here. All of the other tribes have many more that they're bringing to the table, but these 200 men play a special role because at this time, not all of the tribes and not all the people are united about the issue of David and him coming to be king. Remember, he's at this point really only ruling over Judah, and it's here that these guys are part of a centralized group within all of the expanded kingdom that unifies them under David. Listen to what it says. Go back. Yeah, there it goes. They understood the times and knew what Israel should do. I love that. They understood the times and they knew what Israel should do. They understood that they were in a time of transition. They understood that this was not the time for factions or division. They understood that there was a lot of jeopardy behind what was going on, and they came to the table and brought unity when it comes to that government. I just love that phrase. They understood the times and they knew what they should do and what should be done. This passage has been used in a corporate setting and personal settings. It's been used from a motivational sense. It's been used from a lot of Christian business sense. Books have been written about it. Just this one little phrase, because of the way the original writer words it. They knew the times and they knew what they should do. Do you feel like you understand the times and you know what you should do with that understanding? You understand your times and you know what you should do. This happens on two levels, corporately and personally. First, just what we're doing as a collective body. I want to give you a quick quick update. I promise we are not going to dwell on this, but I want to give it to you because it's important. Number one, we've pulled together as a community of faith. Though there are 3 services and tons of people meeting on this campus every Sunday morning, and it appears to be chaos at some points, we have pulled together and have decided to continue to expand the kingdom work here at this site. We're continuing to expand physically and from a program standpoint and advance the gospel message here in this community. We've made financial commitment to do that together. We've made promise to do that together, and we are well on our way. I'd like to give you the good news update. For those that are coming late to the game, for those that are just kind of coming in and trying to figure out what Vine is all about, we are quickly expanding, and I'm showing you pictures of the concept and idea that we all came around as we begin to move forward. We've made financial commitment to do this. The church has come together and said we want to raise about $300,000 cash. We need to sell a piece of property that we own. We'd like to pull all that and in 2017 break ground on a new structure, a new building here on this property. That's our plan as we're kind of moving forward. It's important for you to know that in our current culture, there is a disconnect many times with what's taking place in faith corporately from what's taking place in faith personally. And this is where it hits you kind of where you're at. And I want to make sure you get this. Are you ready? And what I'm about to say, there's going to go over a lot of people's heads, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So here we go. Check this out. When in westernized, Americanized Christianity, we think of everything, especially faith, in very selfish terms through a very selfish lens. And so when we come to a church or choose to be a part of a church, it's typically motivated by some very selfish and self-centered things that aren't all bad, all right? And so I know selfish sounds like a bad word, but aren't all bad. It's just what we do. It's how we exist within this broken world. And so when we come to a faith family, to a church family, and we get to be a part of it, we're asking these kind of questions. Does this fit me? Do I like it? Do I like the music? Do I like the preaching? Does he talk about the things I like? Does he not talk about the things I like? Does he dress like I like? Does he not? What? All those kind of things are running through our minds, and we're assessing it by a very selfish, kind of self-centered kind of lens when it comes to what we want in our faith community. The problem is many of us who are just getting started on that journey are never able to make it to the next step of maturity where we realize you're being invited into something that's not just for you, but something that you'll participate in. God is doing work in his kingdom worldwide, and you, when you intersect with a local body of believers, become part of what God is doing in the world. And at that moment, whether you get it or not, whether you fully embrace it or not, whether you wrap your brain around that or not, whether you're spiritually mature enough to get that, at that moment, you move out of selfishness into selflessness, and you realize God is calling me to participate and give into, whether it's time, energy, treasure, whatever, to what God's doing in the world. Are you with me? Now, here's where it gets dicey. At the moment, when there's that disconnect and we haven't understood that, it becomes very easy for us to misunderstand what's going on with us personally and relative to what's taking place corporately. And I say that to say this, and I'll try not to be too vague. At a time like this, where the collective community as a whole, where the family of God as a whole has committed to together to move forward in advancing the kingdom of Christ in this community, it's at that point where there's tremendous amount of spiritual resistance. And I know this is where it gets weird, okay? But I'm just going to say it. The Bible speaks a tremendous amount of realms that we don't always fully understand. That there's battles taking place in spiritual levels that we don't always get. And whether or not you've come to the place in your spiritual walk where you think about evil, where you think about a personification of evil, where you think about resistance and brokenness and all the things that go wrong in our world, all of us are in agreement that we're in that. We just all don't quite understand it the same way. Here's the deal. Many of us, in the midst of our own personal struggles, disconnect that personal struggle with what's happening corporately. You are a part of a family that's moving very quickly towards advancing the kingdom of God and those goals. In that moment, I believe we become a target for everything that is broken. And so I would just say this. At a time like this, you need to know that I think we are under the gun. The good news is, I'm not saying this to some like we're well on track for all our goals to redo all that or go through that. That's the good news. The tough news is I think we tend to look at problems that we have, whether they be financial, in marriage, in relationships, in parenting, in vocation, and only assess those in the personal and never realize that maybe that's part of a bigger problem that's taking place in what's going on in this community and what's going on with God's kingdom expanding. I would encourage you in your prayer life as you seek God in faith, that when you think about your connection to the family of God and what God's doing in the world, that everything, even the details that are very personal to you, are connected to the whole, connected to what God's doing in the world. Are you with me? All right. Let's talk about the personal, because that's where I want to spend most of our time today. So when it comes to like a passage like this, it says they understood the times and they knew what to do and they made the right decisions. They were wise and discerning in the moments. Do you think you're doing that personally? Do you think you're making those kind of righteous decisions, wisdom decisions, discerning based decisions in your homes, in your marriages, with your kids, with your vocation, with the things that are before you, with your own personal morality? Do you think you've got that under control? Because that's really what this passage is talking about. Wouldn't it be great if you were able to say, I fully get where I'm at. I fully get the times that I'm in. I realize exactly the brokenness I'm facing, and I'm making decisions that are in step with God's will. How about that? That would be awesome. Are you with me? Do you ever notice that guys tend to come up with the absolute most ridiculous solutions to problems? That we understand our times very well, and then we make decisions based upon those circumstances and times, and some of them are strange. Do you ever notice that guys come up with some of the most strangest solutions? Can I prove this to you? Are you with me? Here we go. Check this out. Let me show you a couple pictures. How about this? The time was we needed a barbecue, and we didn't have a barbecue. And so this is a guy's solution. Are you with me? Is there a shopping cart in the house? Are you with me? That's a guy's solution, right? They understood the times and they knew what they should do. All right? Okay, how about this? Check this out. The toilet paper keeps disappearing. We're going to bike lock that beast to the bathroom because we understand the need and the times and we knew what we should do. Next slide. How about this? I need a six-pack and I don't have the time. I understand this is going to take more time than I need. I'd like to shave that beast right into. This is so good, isn't it? I love that guy. I want to hang out with that guy. Next slide. He's going to be so much fun on the weekends. You know that guy's a great time. How about these guys? We needed shade, and this is what we came up with. It was hot, and this was our solution. Are you with me? Are you with me? How about this guy? Gatorland was packed and the kid couldn't see over the rail. So, no mom comes up with the solution. Do you notice that? No mom's like, yeah, just put the stroller on this railing. That'll be good. Nobody does that, Do I have any other good ones or is that it? Okay, yeah, this guy. When your bike gets a flat, what do? Well, you put it on your camel. I just love this. Okay, so we tend to come up with crazy solutions, and here's the deal. The sons of Issachar looked at their circumstances. They looked at the divisiveness. They looked at the possibility of this thing going bad in a bad way quickly and uniting the kingdom. They brought the other tribes in under David's leadership. They understood the times. They knew what they should do. Do you understand the times for you? Are you with me? Listen to what Ephesians says. Let's take a look at this. Ephesians chapter 5 says, so be careful how you live. You hear that? Careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity. These days are evil. Make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Listen to this. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Are you with me? Let's look at the first part of that. Be careful, the days are evil. Do you believe, at least at some level, that there's this pervasive brokenness and that the days are evil, right? We live in a sense of that brokenness. I hope I don't have to convince you of that. I think you can turn on the nightly news tonight and see, pure reflections of those things. We live in trying times and we need to be careful. Let me give you some examples. How about this? Be careful what you take in your mind. We live in a time of unprecedented information where you can get information like no other time in world history. It is amazing how much information is constantly at your fingertips. And so constantly we're being bombarded, whether it's visually or what you read or what you take in or your phone or your apps or it's just amazing. And for many of us, we've just decided that we'll take it all in. There'll be no barriers, and whatever we take in, we'll sift through later. But there's a challenge to that, isn't it? That sometimes we can get so distracted by all the information, whether it's good, bad, moral, or immoral, whatever, all that information coming in, the information alone can overload. Just the focus on taking that in can separate us from those that we love the most. And so we are constantly bombarded, some of that good, some of that toxic, and that toxic just comes out in our life sometimes. And so be careful what you're taking into your mind. Next slide. Colossians chapter 3, verse 2 says, set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things of earth. Set your mind on the things that are above. Are you actively doing that? Setting your mind on God. Next slide. How about this? Be careful. Be careful what you take into your body. I know this is a tough one, especially for us. We just take it all in. We live in a time where everything is almost prepared for us. We're taking it all in, and this is not just food, but it's that too. All of it just comes in and we sift it later and decide later if it was good or bad for us. And that's a dangerous deal too. What we're taking in has tremendous effect on our bodies and on our countenance. Listen to this, Philippians chapter 3. Many walk as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their end is destruction. Their God is their belly. Are you with me? We can become enslaved to the things that we're taking into our life, into our mind, and into our body. It says, and they glory in their shame with minds set on earthly things. When we're taking things into our body, our minds that are distracting us from God, there will ultimately be a negative outcome in our life. Next slide. Check this. How about this? Be careful the company you keep. And for all the young people, I say, be careful the company you keep. One more time. Some of us older folks have learned this the hard way through the school of hard knocks. Be careful the company you keep. It has an amazing effect on your life and life choices. Psalms chapter 1, verse 1 says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked or stands in the way of sinners. If you haven't memorized that one, that would be a good place to start. For all my students in the house, be careful the company you pick. The days are evil. Are you with me? Next slide. And this, be careful the judgment you cast. Be careful the judgment you cast. Listen to the words of Christ here as he talks about this in Matthew chapter 7. Judge not that you be not judged, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. That is a significant sentence there. I mean, that's like, we could take some time and really explore that, but that is like in your face. Be careful the judgment you use and those you look down upon. The Lord takes this serious. Next slide. How about this? Be careful the words you say. Be careful the words you say. Next slide. James chapter 1 says, if you claim to be religious, but do not control your tongue, you are fooling yourself and your religion is worthless. Think about that. Does James actually believe, or is this just rhetorical? Does he actually believe that it's possible for people to have a fooled religious sense of security? Is it possible in James that he's actually meaning this, that he's literally saying there's going to be a collection of people who will fool themselves into believing they're good with God? Are you with me? That is a dangerous passage there that he's rolling off of his tongue. Be careful. One of the signs to those who are fooling themselves is they do not yet have control of their tongue. Are you with me? Next slide. How about this? Understand what the Lord wants you to do. That second part of Ephesians is understand what the Lord wants you to do. Be careful. The days are evil. Understand what the Lord wants you to do. Think about what Paul's saying. He's talking to the church, people just like you and I, gathering in the name of Christ. He says, You need to know what the Lord wants you to do. Why? Well, for Paul, it's the difference between, in my opinion, Christianity and discipleship. I want you to think about this for a moment. We live in a time where the term Christianity is completely nebulous. It means many different things to many different people. In fact, for many of us, it just means it's a statement about culture or background or how we were raised or what our parents were or a certain set of faith principles or a certain set of moral underpinnings. It means a whole lot of things, but it doesn't really mean what we see in the authentic followers of Christ early on. It just doesn't. It means a whole bunch of things. I mean, think about this just for a moment. The followers of Christ never referred to themselves as Christians. Did you know that? They don't refer to themselves as Christians at all. In fact, it's people outside of the followers of Christ. It's the broken world who looks in at the followers of Christ and first calls them Christians. You can find that in Acts chapter 11. We never used that term for ourselves. It's become the predominant term for what describes this faith, but it was never meant to be that way. Are you ready for the term that the followers of Christ always used? Are you ready? Anybody know? Disciples. I just challenge you to replace those terms. I challenge you to replace it openly. Go to work tomorrow and say, I want you to say out loud, go to work tomorrow, look at your coworker and say, man, church was great yesterday. I am a disciple. Have I told you that? And watch them squirm. That is a weird word, isn't it? Well, where do you go to church? Well, I go to this church over here. We're all disciples. Excuse me? Oh, okay. You're one of those, huh? Tell me about your cult. Are you with me? That word is totally different than Christian, isn't it? Christian can be anything. It can literally be anything. I mean, I was playing golf with a guy last weekend after service. We were playing golf. I was playing golf with two guys here at church, and we were playing golf with a guy we got paired with. Golf's a foursome, and we got paired with a guy, which is always weird because halfway through the round, inevitably they always ask, what do you do? Which always ends up being cool because they've mostly cursed throughout the round up at that point. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a minister. And then they're like, and so he says, what are you doing? I go, well, I'm a minister. I go to church with these two clowns. And he goes, oh. He goes, well, I'm Jewish. And I said, that's great. I said, are you practicing? And he said, no. I said, oh, when was the last time you were at synagogue? And he said, my bar mitzvah. I said, That's just a small illustration of how we think of religion in modern culture. You can be something that you've never practiced. It can describe just your heritage and or history. It can mean a whole bunch of things. Christianity is the exact same way, but disciple is a different term. Disciple's like, I'm following somebody. That's what it means. I'm a learner. I'm a follower. I'm following somebody. Oh, who are you a disciple of, right? Because disciple is like a very definite term that describes very definite things that has no ambiguity to it. It's like, ooh, okay, you're serious about this, aren't you? That's what disciple is. And so I would implore you with this idea that when Paul looks to the church and writes this, that the times are evil, be careful. He says, you need to know what the Lord wants you to do. Why? Because Paul believes that the followers of Christ are disciples, that they're literally living their life saying to themselves, what would Christ do? What would Christ want from us? That they approach their times that are evil and literally say, we know what to do, and what we are going to do is what Christ would do. Are you with me? Boom. How about this? Let's give you some examples. What would Christ do about forgiveness? If you're here and you're struggling with issues of forgiveness and struggling through personal relationship battles, and you say, well, I'm a Christian, and I'm going to hold on to bitterness. See, Christians can hold on to bitterness. Disciples, that's a whole different deal. Christians can be like, yeah, I hate them. All right? Disciples are like, well, wait a minute. You're a follower of Christ. And Christ has a lot to say about the issue of forgiveness. Did you know that? He says 70 times 7. He says a whole bunch of things. Listen to this. Mark chapter 11, he says, whenever you stand praying, and this is the idea of worship, and we're all gathered today to worship. When you stand praying, if you have anything, anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you of your sins. Boom. Whoa. Did he just say that? Did he say our forgiveness is connected to the forgiveness we give others? These are powerful words. Impossible to go, well, I'm going to hold on to bitterness. Followers of Christ embrace the way of Christ. All right, next slide. How about this? What would Christ do about giving? Oh, gosh, here we go. I know. What would he do? Give. It will be given to you. Next slide. Check this out. What would Christ say about the heavy-hearted and say to the heavy-hearted? If you've come here today struggling, heavy, burden, whether it's relationally, financially, vocationally, all those things, right? He says this. Next slide. Come to me, all who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Would you believe, followers of Christ, when heavily burdened, lay those burden in faith at the feet of Christ and seek solace in worship? Are you with me? Christians just hold on to that stuff. They go around going, oh, it's awful. I'm just overwhelmed. All right, how about this? What would Christ say to those who face impossible odds? What would Christ say to those who face impossible odds? And some of us are looking at relationships or financial situations, and we're going, this is not looking good. But Christ says this. Christ says, nothing will be impossible with God. And people of faith believe that and act upon it accordingly. Boom. Next slide. How about this? What would Christ say about what we value? About the things we place value and appreciation and love and adoration and what we value. What would Christ say? Next slide. How about this? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's what he says. And so those who are following after Christ, who have become disciples of Christ, have chose to put him first and value him above everything. Next slide. How about this? What would Christ say about my worries? And I had a week full of worry. I'm admitting that freely to you, that I struggle with that too. And if you come today with worries, what does Christ say about worries? In Matthew chapter 6, he says, which of you by worrying can add even 1 hour to his life? And I encourage you with that thought. Has it helped at all this week, all that worrying? No. Next slide. How about this? What does Christ teach about discipleship? What does Christ teach about the issue of discipleship? Paul looks at the church in Ephesians and says, look, you need to know what Christ would do because you are followers of Christ. You are disciples. You're not just some nebulous idea of religious people, spiritual, pursuing Christians. You're followers of Christ. Your first question in life is, what would Christ do? Sign me up. That's what discipleship is. Listen what he says in Matthew chapter 7. He says, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. You ever notice that we live in a culture who is constantly saying, well, I know what the Bible, I know what Jesus said, but, and we add all of these things. The truth is, do you understand the times that you're a part of? Do you realize that the days are evil? Are you being careful to follow the way of Christ? Are you with me? What would you do with Christ's direction? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for a chance to gather in your name. Put our hope and trust in you. And as we face issues of morality, issues of relations, as we face down next steps, as we have decisions before us, Father, that are left or right, that don't even seem that they have any moral bearing, that they're just decisions. Father, would you give us discernment? Would you give us wisdom? Would you give us guidance that is can only be described as from you? Father, would you renew us with a passion to be your disciples, your followers? I want to encourage you today, take a moment to think that through, prayerfully consider that before the Lord. Come and receive communion, to close out the service today. Take the bread, dip it in the wine, receive it, remembering that's Christ in you, the hope of glory. If you're here, I just want to challenge you with this last thought as we kind of rush to a close, that if you're here and you've come in and you thought, well, as you describe the difference between disciple and Christian, I definitely fall a little bit more towards the cultural Christian side. As you think through that, I'd like to challenge you today that maybe it's time to either renew your passion as a disciple and or to make a first-time commitment and surrender your life to being a disciple. If you've kind of just floated along in faith or kind of floated along in this Christian experience or in this faith community and you've never really made that concrete, that I'd challenge you today that this might be the day for you. Maybe you're here and you've never, ever, through prayer, sealed it and said, Father, I choose you. I will follow you. You are my leader. I lay my life down before you. I'm not just investigating it any longer. I'm not just thinking through it. I'm not just tinkering around and applying things here and there, things that I want, and leaving things that I don't. I will follow you. I will be your disciple. I will ask, what would Christ want first? If that's where you are, and you're ready to make that kind of decision, and you know you really haven't made that kind of decision up until this point, I'm going to challenge you as everybody starts to move. There'll be folks up here on the left and the right. They'll be willing to pray over you, pray for you, commit this in prayer with you, and seal this and get this done today. You would know you have, in a really significant way, marked the moment that you surrendered your heart to being a disciple. I'll give you a few moments to think that through, and when you're ready, and everybody starts moving for communion, and if that's your heartbeat, come on up. Grab one of these guys, let them pray over you, and get this thing done. When you're ready, you come. God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me